Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when and where you're watching this. Welcome to another Festival in a Box 2.0 session. Delighted to say that we have Joe Ellis with us, one of the whiskey specialists with Edrington Suntory, and he's going to talk to us in this session about the Auchentoshan 3 wood. So let me just bring Joe in. Joe, how are you doing, man?
I'm really good, thanks, Eddie. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not bad. I'm not going to reveal that it's Monday morning. Oops. Yeah, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good. Looking forward to this session. Anyway, listen, tell us a bit about yourself and what you do with EBS, Edrington Suntory, and how you got to be doing what you're doing.
So it started around about 10 years ago. So I've been in the whiskey industry for around about 10 years. And I got into it I was working at a record store, like a DJ equipment store. And the owner of that decided to set up an online whiskey store, which is now known as Hard to Find Whiskey. So I worked at the very early stages of that, just doing tiny little bits for the website. And then I joined the whiskey shop chain in the UK, and it was like a light bulb moment for me. I'd kind of liked whiskey, didn't really know a huge amount about it, but clicked with one of the managers at the whiskey shop, went to a tasting, and like many people who, get involved with tastings for the first time, it's just the amount of different flavors and distilleries and options that you've got in the world of whiskey is just immense. So then I started working for the whiskey shop for a few years, did some bar work in a kind of whiskey specialist cocktail bar, and then worked for Hard to Find Whiskey when they opened the shop in Birmingham. And then there was a job available with Edrington Suntory when they used to be called Maxium. Started off in sales at Edrington Suntory, and then eventually joined the whiskey specialist team, which is the training and education and advocacy arm of the company. So it was kind of going back 10 years, it was a complete accident getting into the industry, but it was like this revelation, this just amazing industry of just flavor, really. And it's for me, it's always been about the flavors that you find in all sorts of whiskey. And during that 10 years, I set up my own YouTube whiskey channel to kind of just teach myself. I've done my various wine and spirits education courses, the WSET, so I've got some qualifications to kind of back up my knowledge and my passion as well. So yeah, I mean, 10 years in now, and I've not looked back, and it's been a journey that still continues to give me like a lot of joy and passion today. So that's 10 years in a very short space of time.
Yes. Well, it's quite a familiar sounding story. It sounds quite similar to my own, and one or two others who, really got into it just through curiosity and then evolving and growing passion for it. Because it's just, if you do get bitten by the whiskey bug, it's quite literally intoxicating, and
Yeah.
you live, breathe it, don't you?
I still remember when I started buying whiskey more regularly, and one of my very first videos on YouTube, or my first one, I've got like a collection of, I don't know, maybe like 8 bottles, and at that point I thought, oh my gosh, I've got so many whiskies. And then you slowly start to buy more. You're, oh, right, okay, now I'm about 100. This could be an issue.
Yeah. I may have developed an issue. Anyway, we could talk forever about this, but why don't you tell us a bit about the bottling that you've provided for this session, the Auchentoshan?
Yeah, so we're tasting the Auchentoshan 3 wood today, which I'll pour myself a little dram of so we can taste along. The 3 wood came about when the distillery manager, blender, were experimenting with how their 10-year-old single malt that matured only in bourbon barrels, how that liquid would be affected by other wood types. So they were experimenting with Oloroso sherry, seasoned wood, Pedro Jimenez sherry or PX. And for those of you, I mean, those of you watching probably know what PX is, but if you're unsure, PX is a heavily sweetened style of sherry. So if you've ever tried Pedro Jimenez or PX sherry, it tastes like liquidized raisins. It's super, super sweet. So yeah, they were experimenting with these different casks and seeing the effect. And they found that the combination of all these three casks just meant this whiskey took on this incredible, this darker hue than what would be just coming from a bourbon cask, and just the incredible array of flavors from those three different wood types. So that's the story of kind of how the three wood originally came about. And now to this day, it's a no age statement. So as you can see, there's not an age on it, and this is a kind of I guess a little bit of a tricky topic for some people. You know, it's a constant topic you'll get into at the likes of whiskey shows and things like that. But actually, when you have a whiskey that's using such intensely flavored wood, like this Oloroso and like this PX, you get so much flavor from these that it's not really necessarily about the age. It's about what the wood does to the spirit and how it affects it. So that's how I like to see some of these no age statement whiskies.
Yeah, well, I think that, you know, we've discussed this with one or two of the other presenters, and you know, an age statement is not a statement of quality; it's a statement of fact.
Yeah.
And therefore, you know, it's not necessarily you know, something that's hugely important. So, Joe, what about in terms of the flavors of the whiskey? I know it's got a very unusual cask makeup. So what's the impact on the flavor? What kind of flavors would you expect to find in that?
So my favorite tasting note from the Auchentoshan 3-wood is sticky toffee pudding. You get that kind of big, rich, sweet kind of date. There's that kind of brown sugar flavor and aroma coming through. It's rich on the palate, and it's often said that lowland whiskies kind of typically light, grassy, floral, whereas this kind of flies in the face of the stereotypical lowland characteristics. This is like rich, decadent, dessert-like whiskey. So yeah, in terms of what to expect, I would say sticky toffee pudding is probably the go-to best description I've ever kind of heard for this.
I think you've hit the nail on the head with you know, the regarding regionality. I think, you know, this whiskey particularly kind of just blows that whole theory apart. And I think, you know, for a long time, really, the whole argument about regionality has been fairly voided because of the, you know, plethora of whiskies being produced all over, not just Scotland, but all over the world.
Yeah.
And the fact that you can produce, you know, pretty much any style of whiskey in most places if you've got the will and the way. But yeah. No,
I always think with the regions, you make a very good point, and part of my role as whiskey specialist is educating bartenders. Well, it's like the biggest chunk of my kind of day to day. I think regionality, it's a really, really good starting point for learning about the world of Scotch whiskey. But kind of once you get past that starting point, yeah, like each and every distillery is making, you know, umpteen different styles. So yeah.
But back to the whiskey itself. I mean, I've been drinking this or tasting this particular expression for many years, and I think it's a lovely, rich, unctuous whiskey. It's kind of after dinner in style, I would say, if you had to put a finger on it, I suppose. It wouldn't necessarily be aperitif, unlike, you know, the American oak or the younger expressions with the, you know, mainly bourbon profile.
Yeah. No, it really is. It's showcasing really well those two extra sherry casks, and you get that PX, and you feel the weight of that PX, don't you? It's that kind of It's different from just Oloroso.
Mm-hmm.
It's thick.
Yeah,
It's probably the best way I would describe it, is that thickness you get.
yes, exactly. It's like oily, viscous. It's lovely, lovely, lovely. Well, anyway, while we're enjoying that, and the viewers at home are enjoying, hopefully, can you maybe just rewind a little bit and tell us a little bit more about Auchentoshan as a distillery? You know, how it came to be, when it came to be, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so the distillery itself, just outside of Glasgow city centre, God, my mind's gone completely blank. Just by the Clyde Bank, and founded in 1823 by a guy called John Bullock, who was a corn merchant, a farmer. We say founded, and this kind of goes for a lot of the distilleries in Scotland that were founded on certain days. Legally, they started, they granted the license for the distillery in 1823, but there's records going back a few kind of 10, 20 years that there was a distillery in the area known as Duntocka, which has quite a similar sounding name to Auchentoshan, Duntocka, Auchentoshan. So potentially there was some illicit distilling going on before it was legally granted its license in 1823. In 1903, you had George and John McLaughlin taking over the distillery, who were wine and spirits merchants. So they had a kind of a knack for the industry already. And in World War II, like a lot of distilleries, the distillery shut down, and thankfully it remained intact during bombing. But it's a widely known fact that there's actually a crater that was caused by a bomb during the war that is now used as the reservoir for the water for the distillery, which is kind of a cool thing. So making the most out of a pretty traumatic situation during the war. We've been producing triple distilled whiskey ever since we opened, and at the moment we're still the only triple distilled single malt in Scotland. In terms of the distillery only produces triple distilled single malt, which at the moment makes us really, really unique. There are a few distilleries kind of coming on board in the next few years that will be producing triple distilled single malt, but at the moment we're sticking true to that kind of really typical lowland style, which was triple distilled. And with that triple distillation, you get this much lighter style of spirit. It makes it much more elegant. It makes it gentler on the palate, and it's a really good kind of entry point to the world of single malt Scotch whisky. You come from the likes of Irish whisky or potentially bourbon, which are usually a little bit softer and a little bit more easygoing. It's that lovely kind of step into the world of Scotch whisky.
Yes. Certainly in my time, I've recommended a lot of Auchentoshan to people who are just coming into whiskey, because it does have that slightly more easygoing, gentle profile, like you say. I mean, obviously, you've mentioned the triple distillation, and I was going to ask you about particular quirks or differences in the production method at Auchentoshan. Perhaps you can elaborate a little bit more on the triple distillation and what how that works, and the impact it has on the spirit, because I guess not everyone will be aware of the triple distillation. I think it's quite important to tell everyone that most Scotch whiskies, single malt whiskies, are double distilled or twice distilled. And the theory is that obviously Irish whiskey was predominantly triple distilled, although there's some debate about that as well. But the fact is that Auchentoshan is triple distilled, and as you say, was the first to really establish that. But yeah, if you could just maybe give us a little bit more information on that, and if there's anything else going on at Auchentoshan which is unique to the distillery.
So in terms of triple distillation, what's happening is you'll take your alcohol wash, which comes out of the washbacks, around about 8 to 10% in alcohol. You'll then put that into your first wash still, which you'll then heat and collect at the end a liquid which is around about 20 to 25%. And then standard distilleries in Scotland will then distill that liquid a second time in your spirit still, and then you'll collect your chosen kind of heart of the spirit, which will be what goes into making your whiskey, going into your casks. Auchentoshan, that spirit will come off the still approximately 69 to 70%. At Auchentoshan and distilleries that use triple distillation, you'll then take that 71% spirit and put it into a third spirit still, and further kind of concentrate and select the ethanol and the congeners that you want. So you're stripping back and stripping away any of the heads and the tails and the flavors that you don't want, and you're trying to get at the heart of the ethanol, this like really, really pure alcohol. Takes it all the way up to 81% ABV. So it's the highest ABV of a Scottish single malt distillery. And at that ABV, you just get this incredible clarity of I guess, alcohol. Really, really pure. You will retain still some characteristics of the barley, because you always want your whiskey to taste of barley, but it will just be incredibly clean. When you take that spirit up to that level of ABV, up to that strength, it means actually when you put that spirit into your casks, you've got more flavor from the casks able to influence the spirit. So you can really let the casks do the work for you. In other distilleries where they'll use, smaller stills and distill to lower ABVs, you'll have a spirit that's more characterful in and of its own right. Whereas taking that up and triple distilling allows you to have really, really good quality casks, which then will have more of an effect on the spirit. So it's this kind of perfect combination of really clean, pure spirit and cask.
I've been to Auchentoshan once actually, and I almost stumbled upon it upon leaving Glasgow, and I popped in because, it would be rude not to.
Yeah.
I was very impressed, by the beautiful gardens that surround it. You wouldn't think once you're in the complex that you're actually, almost within Glasgow city limits. And be, obviously seeing the three triple distillation in action, very, very much worth visiting, and they welcome visitors, don't you? Is it open again now?
I don't actually know. I'll be completely honest.
Okay.
I've not checked. Yeah.
For those staycationers amongst us, of which there are many now, it's definitely worth checking out. Having been to a few distilleries recently, probably the visitor centre is open, but may not be open for tours. But call the distillery and find out. In terms of the future for the distillery and for Auchentoshan, are there any kind of exciting developments upcoming? Any new bottlings or anything that we should get excited about?
So I think there's going to be the third iteration of the bartender's malt, which we don't have a release date on that yet, and a lot of this obviously is kind of under wraps, so we can't talk too much about upcoming releases. But I know that there will be a third bartender's malt, which is part of our new malt order competition, where bartenders from all around the world compete in a bartending cocktail competition, and then they will get together with Ron Welsh, the master distiller, and they will choose casks, and they will put together a special bottling for certain markets that will then go out. So we have the second edition here, and then the third edition will be coming out at some point. Again, I don't have a date. I don't have a particular market that's going into, but that will be an up and coming release. The newest thing really at the moment with Auchentoshan is just getting this new packaging out there, which some of you may not have seen. So we've really kind of made an effort to make our packaging a little bit more modern, a little bit kind of brighter. For those of you who have seen the packaging kind of previous to this, it was basically all grey with a little bit of colour. So we've kind of really upped our packaging and made it a lot more modern and much more stands out much more on the shelf. So yeah, that's all I can say for now in terms of up and coming releases. Obviously, all this stuff is kind of under non-disclosure agreements and all this kind of stuff. So
I think I can safely say that Official Secrets Acts might be involved here somewhere. Cool. Okay, thanks for that. Just finally, what from a personal point of view, what's your view on the current state of the world whiskey industry, including Scotch whiskey, but perhaps the wider globe? And is there anything that you're either excited about or even concerned about?
Oh, that's a big question.
It is.
I'm really excited about the use of. I like when distilleries will pioneer or kind of showcase unique fermentation times, use of unique casks, and putting kind of unique cask finishes into kind of core ranges. I like when distilleries will put cask strength versions of their whiskey into their kind of current range. That's always really exciting, and also the use of locally sourced grains and materials and that kind of thing. I think there's some distilleries out there that are doing really, really cool stuff with, getting down to the exact location of a farm and exactly what soil that barley's grown in. That sort of thing. I think personally that's kind of really, really cool. It's a really unique way of looking at whiskey, and it actually goes into making people think a bit more about actually what they are drinking and what's in their glass. There's a lot more to whiskey than meets the eye. There's always decisions that people probably don't necessarily think about. Another thing that really excites me is everything around sustainability. So, more sustainable packaging, trying to kind of really highlight green credentials of distilleries to people and show that, if we can reuse packaging and reuse casks and new ways of getting more flavor into old casks, that's kind of really cool. Other things I'm concerned about, to answer that, I'm a little bit concerned about the secondary market, I'll be honest. I think, and it's a really hard subject to broach, because people should be free to kind of buy what they want and pay for what they want. But I do get concerned when I see brand new distilleries bottlings being bought and then immediately going to auction. But it's a really tricky subject to broach, because the market's there and people are there to buy it. So it's just a little concern. I don't know if there's an easy answer to that. But I guess it's something personally that I'm a little bit concerned about.
Yeah.
And people buying entire cases of stock and putting that entire case onto the secondary market. But I'm sure, as you know, you've probably had this discussion many times. It's a really tricky subject to kind of talk about,
Yeah, well, I think certainly there was one of the other sessions where we talked about this a little bit, because it is increasingly irritating, to say the least. It's just a shame that there are a small minority of people who feel it is appropriate to just exploit whiskey. That you and I and most of the people I'm sure that we talk to and get on with in the whiskey industry. You know, we buy whiskey to drink it because we enjoy drinking whiskey and we enjoy sharing whiskey.
Yeah.
Whereas this is, to my mind, is very anti-whiskey. You know, the whole reason I got into whiskey was the camaraderie and the, you know, the sharing and the excitement of tasting new things, and flipping, as they call it, is completely contrary to that, I think.
Yeah.
But you know, you're right. It's a very difficult subject to not necessarily to talk about, but to deal with. And I know there are, you know, many distillers and, you know, bottlers are trying to deal with it in some manner. Some of the ways they're doing it are slightly more radical than others. I don't know if there will ever be a completely foolproof way of doing it, but hopefully they can be discouraged and slapped on the wrist at least.
Yeah, maybe that's a business idea, the flip-free whiskey company or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, one of the ones I like is that if you buy a bottle of a particular brand that, you know, perhaps is very collectible, you have to go and collect it in person, and you have to open it in front of them.
Yeah.
Which sounds a bit extreme, but you know, it certainly would stop, you know, that particular bottling reaching the secondary market.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've probably taken up your time wittering away about this.
Pleasure.
But listen, thanks for joining us for this session. I hope you've enjoyed it yourself. I'm certain the viewers at home will have enjoyed it and enjoyed the 3-wood Auchentoshan. So thank you for taking part and providing us with this lovely whiskey. So I will say to you, Slanjavar.
Slanjavar.
And well, the hope is that we'll see one another at some point in the not too distant future via the means of actual face-to-face conversation and beer drinking.
Yes, I really do.
Yeah. So thanks again, Joe, and I will see you soon, hopefully.
Thanks, Eddie.
Cheers.